March 27th, 2026, 4:12 local time, somewhere over the Strait of Hormuz. Lieutenant Commander Aaron Voss is flying his third combat air patrol in 31 hours. His A-18E Super Hornet is burning fuel faster than planned. The tanker he was supposed to meet 12 minutes ago never showed. He has enough gas for 47 minutes of flight time. The nearest recovery deck, the USS Gerald R Ford, is 93 miles southeast, and his radar warning receiver just lit up with a signal he hasn't seen in 6 months of deployment. An Iranian Bavar 373 air defense battery? Active, scanning, searching for him. Voss keys his radio. Warhammer, Raven 1-1. Spike, bearing 340. Bavar. Request immediate vector to tanker. Silence. 5 seconds. 10. Then a voice from the E-2D Hawkeye, managing the airspace above the Gulf. Raven 1-1. All tanker assets currently committed. Nearest available refueling in 38 minutes. He doesn't have 38 minutes. He has fuel for 47, minus the 10 it takes to reach the Ford, minus the 5-minute reserve that keeps him from ejecting into the Persian Gulf. That leaves him 32 minutes on station, in a threat environment that just went active. This is not a malfunction. This is not a one-time failure. This is what happens when the United States Air Force and Navy try to sustain over 100 aircraft in continuous operations above one of the most contested waterways on Earth. I'm your host at Battlefront Signal, where we break down the most critical naval operations shaping global power. Today, the inside story of the largest sustained air campaign since Desert Storm. How American air power tried to enforce a total blockade of Iran. What broke? What held? And the classified briefing where a carrier air wing commander told his admiral the fleet had 11 days before the entire operation collapsed. To understand why over 100 U.S. military aircraft were flying simultaneous missions over the Persian Gulf by late March 2026, you need to go back 5 months. October 2025. The crisis that had been simmering between Washington and Tehran since the June nuclear strikes reached a breaking point. Iran announced it was resuming enrichment at a dispersed network of small, hardened facilities. Sites that American bunker busters couldn't reach because they didn't know where all of them were. The intelligence failure was significant. The National Geospatial Intelligence Agency identified 3 new sites in the Zagros Mountains. The CIA suspected at least 4 more existed. None had been on the original target list during Operation Midnight Hammer. President Trump authorized what the Pentagon internally called Operation Persian Gate, a comprehensive naval blockade designed to prevent Iran from importing the specialized equipment needed for centrifuge manufacturing. Carbon fiber, miraging steel, frequency converters, flow-forming machines. The blockade was technically legal under the expanded UN Security Council Resolution 2231 framework, though Russia and China both abstained from the enforcement vote. It covered all Iranian ports: Bandar Abbas, Chabahar, Bushehr, Bandar Imam Khomeini, and the critical choke point of the Strait of Hormuz itself. By November 2025, the USS Gerald R Ford Carrier Strike Group was on station. By December, the USS Harry S. Truman joined from the Mediterranean. 2 nuclear-powered aircraft carriers, over 160 aircraft between them, the largest concentration of American naval aviation in the Middle East since 2003. But carriers alone don't enforce a blockade. Aircraft do. The Air Tasking Order for Operation Persian Gate was a document that ran over 200 pages every 24 hours. It assigned every aircraft in the theater a specific mission, time window, altitude block, refueling schedule, and set of rules of engagement. The numbers were staggering. On any given day, the operation required a minimum of 14 F/A, 18 E/F. Super Hornets flying combat air patrol. 2 ship formations covering 4 sectors of the strait around the clock. Each patrol lasted between 6 and 16 hours depending on tanker availability. 12 P-8A Poseidon maritime patrol aircraft rotated from bases in Bahrain, Djibouti, and Diego Garcia, running continuous anti-submarine warfare sweeps. Iran's Kilo-class submarines, 3 operational boats purchased from Russia in the 1990s, were the single biggest threat to blockade enforcement. A single torpedo into a container ship could shatter the legal and political framework of the entire operation. 6 to 8 E-2D advanced Hawkeyes maintained constant airborne early warning coverage. These aircraft were the nervous system of the blockade, tracking every vessel, every aircraft, every radar emission within 300 miles of the strait. Without them, the fighters were blind. And then there were the tankers. KC-135 Stratotankers and KC-46 Pegasus aircraft operating from Udeid Air Base in Qatar flew between 80 and 90 refueling sorties per day. Every fighter on combat air patrol needed gas every 2 to 3 hours. Miss one refueling window and a patrol gap opens. A patrol gap means an Iranian fast boat or submarine can transit the strait unchallenged. Add in the A-18G Growler electronic warfare aircraft jamming Iranian radar, the MQ-4C Triton drones flying at 60,000 feet with synthetic aperture radar mapping every vessel in the Gulf, the occasional B-52 show of force sortie from Diego Garcia, and the MH-60R Seahawk helicopters flying from every destroyer and cruiser in the strike group. On March 22, 2026, CENTCOM's daily air operations summary counted 114 U.S. military aircraft airborne simultaneously over or adjacent to the Persian Gulf theater. 114. The last time American air power operated at that density was January 17, 1991, the opening night of Desert Storm. The comparison was accurate in scale, but Desert Storm's air campaign lasted 43 days. By March 2026, Operation Persian Gate had been running continuously for 137 days, and the machines were breaking. The first signs appeared in January. The Ford's Air Wing, Carrier Air Wing 8, began reporting a metric that made maintenance officers lose sleep: mission-capable rates, the percentage of aircraft that could actually fly on any given day. For the F/A-18E Super Hornet, the Navy's benchmark is 72% mission-capable. In peacetime, squadrons often struggle to hit that number. Chronic spare parts shortages, aging airframes, and overworked maintenance crews kept the fleet average hovering around 60% even before the blockade. In November 2025, when the Ford first arrived on station, CVW-8's Super Hornets were at 68% MC. Respectable. Close to the benchmark. The maintenance department was working 12-hour shifts. Sustainable. By January, the rate dropped to 59%. 16-hour shifts became standard. Engine replacements that normally required 12 hours were being done in 6. Corners weren't being cut exactly, but margins were disappearing. February brought the real crisis. A single event cascaded through the entire air wing. On February 14th, an FA-18E from VFA 213, the Black Lions, suffered a compressor stall during a catapult launch. The pilot, Lieutenant Junior Grade Sarah Okonkwo, handled the emergency flawlessly. She maintained control, dumped fuel, and recovered aboard the Ford on her first approach. No injury, no airframe loss, but the engine was destroyed. An F414-GE-400 turbofan engine, and the Ford didn't have a spare. The supply chain for F414 engines runs through a depot in Jacksonville, Florida. Under normal circumstances, a replacement engine reaches a carrier in the Persian Gulf in 7 to 10 days. But Operation Persian Gate had been consuming engines at 3 times the projected rate. The depot was backlogged. The earliest available engine wouldn't arrive for 19 days. That meant VFA 213 was down 1 aircraft for nearly 3 weeks. In a squadron of 12 jets, losing 1 sounds manageable. But 2 other Black Lions aircraft were already down. 1 for a hydraulic leak, another waiting on an avionics component from Japan. 3 jets out of 12. 25% of the squadron. The Combat Air Patrol schedule couldn't absorb the loss. CVW-8's operations officer, Commander Diana Reeves, started borrowing aircraft from other squadrons. VFA-31, the Tomcatters, gave up 1 Hornet. VFA-87, The Golden Warriors gave up 2. The patch held for a week. Then VFA-87 lost a jet to a landing gear failure, and VFA-31 discovered fatigue cracks in the wing root of one of their aircraft during a routine inspection. Cracks that grounded the jet indefinitely and triggered mandatory inspections across the entire squadron. By March 1st, CVW-8's mission capable rate for Super Hornets was 41%. 41. Nearly half the Air Wing's strike fighters couldn't fly. Rear Admiral Catherine Solorzano, commanding Carrier Strike Group 12 aboard the Ford, received the maintenance report at 6 o'clock on March 2nd. She read it twice. Then she called the Air Wing commander, Captain James Hutch Hutchinson, to her flag bridge. The conversation, according to sources familiar with the briefing, lasted 40 minutes. Hutchinson laid out the math. At current sortie rates, the MC rate would continue to decline by approximately 2 percentage points per week. If the trend held, CVW-8 would drop below 30% mission capable by mid-March, a rate at which the Air Wing could not sustain the minimum 14 aircraft combat air patrol required by the Blockade tasking order. Solorzano asked the obvious question: what about the Truman? The Truman's Air Wing was in better shape, 53% MC, but it was covering the southern sector of the blockade, from the Gulf of Oman to the Arabian Sea approaches. Pulling Truman aircraft north meant opening a gap in the outer perimeter. Iranian submarines could exploit that gap within hours. Hutchinson presented 3 options. Option 1: reduce combat air patrol coverage from 14 aircraft to 10. This would leave a 6-hour window every day where one sector of the strait had no fighter coverage. Iranian fast attack craft could transit during that window. Option 2: extend individual patrol times from 16 hours to 20. This would maintain coverage but push pilots beyond the Navy's crew rest standards. Fatigue-related accidents become statistically likely after 18 hours of continuous flight operations. Option 3: request emergency aircraft from continental United States. Fly replacement Super Hornets from Naval Air Station Lemoore to the Gulf. Transit time: approximately 48 hours with tanker support. This would take 7 to 10 days to meaningfully improve the MC rate. Solorzano chose a combination. She authorized extended patrols to 18 hours, pushing the limit but not exceeding it, and requested emergency aircraft. She also sent a message to CENTCOM headquarters at MacDill Air Force Base that would eventually reach the Joint Chiefs. The message was classified secret and contained a single critical assessment. At current operational tempo, Carrier Air Wing 8 could sustain blockade tasking for approximately 11 more days before aircraft availability dropped below combat minimum thresholds. 11 days. That number landed on the desk of the chairman of the Joint Chiefs on March 3rd. According to declassified scheduling records, an emergency meeting of the Joint Requirements Oversight Council convened that afternoon. The Air Force offered a partial solution. Additional KC-46 tankers were deployed from Fairchild Air Force Base to Al Udeid, increasing refueling capacity by 30%. This allowed shorter patrol legs, which reduced engine hours per sortie, which slowed the maintenance degradation curve. The Navy's solution was more dramatic. The destroyer USS Nitsa, equipped with an AN/SPY-6 radar, was repositioned to the Central Strait specifically to provide radar coverage that would have been handled by fighters. A warship filling in for aircraft. It was improvised, it worked. But the deeper problem remained. The United States military had designed its force structure for short, intense conflicts or long, low-tempo presence operations. Operation Persian Gate was neither. It demanded high-intensity operations sustained over months. The math didn't work. The aircraft couldn't take it. The people couldn't take it. On the Ford, maintenance crews were collapsing from exhaustion. The ship's medical department reported a 300% increase in fatigue-related injuries. Dropped tools, slipped wrenches, a petty officer who fell asleep standing up and struck his head on an engine nacelle. The senior enlisted advisor for CVW-8, Master Chief Robert Tanaka, sent a written memo to Captain Hutchinson, documenting what he called a safety crisis in the maintenance department. Tanaka's memo was blunt. 3-paragraph document, no bureaucratic softening. He wrote that his sailors were averaging 4 hours of sleep per night. That error rates on maintenance procedures had doubled since January. That it was a matter of time, not possibility, before a maintenance error caused a Class A mishap, a crash, a death. Hutchinson forwarded the memo to Admiral Solorzano. She forwarded it to 5th Fleet Headquarters in Bahrain. The document is now part of the classified post-operation review. Meanwhile, Iran was adapting. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy, the IRGCN, had spent months studying the blockade's patterns. Every combat air patrol had a rhythm, tanker rendezvous times, sector handoff windows. The moments when coverage was thinnest. Iranian intelligence didn't need spy satellites to figure this out. They had fishing boats, hundreds of them transiting the strait daily with AIS transponders broadcasting their positions, and crews with cell phones photographing every American aircraft they could see. By mid-March, the IRGCN began probing. Fast attack craft, Zulfiqar-class missile boats and smaller Paycop speedboats started making aggressive approaches toward commercial vessels under blockade inspection. They would sprint from Iranian coastal waters at 45 knots, close to within 5 nautical miles of the inspection zone, then turn away before American forces could respond. The approaches were never directly threatening. No weapons lock, no hostile fire. But each one forced American aircraft to break from patrol patterns to investigate. Each investigation burned fuel. Each fuel burn required a tanker. Each tanker diversion reduced availability for other aircraft. It was a strategy of exhaustion. Iran couldn't match American firepower, so it attacked the one resource America couldn't surge: time. March 19th. The probing escalated. A group of 7 IRGCN fast boats sortied from Bandar Abbas at 2:30 local time. A departure time calculated to coincide with the Combat Air Patrol's scheduled tanker rendezvous window. For approximately 22 minutes, the central sector of the strait had reduced fighter coverage. 2 Super Hornets were on the tanker boom. 2 more were inbound from the southern sector, but 12 minutes away. The 7 boats split into 3 groups. 2 headed northeast toward a Greek-flagged tanker being inspected by the destroyer USS Gonzales. 3 headed southeast toward the traffic separation scheme. 2 more paralleled the Omani coast, the E-2D Hawkeye managing the airspace. Call sign closeout, tracked all 7 contacts. The tactical action officer aboard the Ford, Lieutenant Commander Yuki Samuels, recognized the pattern immediately. This wasn't a probe. This was a coordinated distraction. Samuels looked at the overall tactical picture and saw what Iran was trying to hide. A Kilo-class submarine had departed Bandar Abbas 18 hours earlier. The P-8A Poseidon tracking it had lost contact 6 hours ago in the acoustic clutter of the shipping lanes. That submarine was now unlocated somewhere in the strait. All stations, this is Ford TAO. I am declaring condition red in the central sector. All units assume hostile submarine in the operating area. Execute ASW plan Bravo. The response was immediate. 2 MH-60R Seahawk helicopters launched from the destroyer, USS Stout, each carrying 3 sonobuoys and a Mark 54 lightweight torpedo. A P-8A Poseidon diverted from its southern patrol track, dropping a line of passive sonobuoys across the western approach to the strait. The Super Hornets on the tanker cut short their refueling and sprinted back to the central sector. They had 40 minutes of fuel. Just enough. The submarine hunt lasted 9 hours. 9 hours of sonobuoy drops, dipping sonar, and acoustic analysis. The Strait of Hormuz is an acoustic nightmare. Shallow water, heavy merchant traffic, thermal layers that bend sound in unpredictable ways. Finding a quiet diesel submarine in those conditions is like finding a whisper in a stadium. At 11:47, a sonobuoy dropped by the P-8A detected blade rate consistent with a Kilo-class boat, making 3 knots at a depth of approximately 70 meters. The contact was 17 nautical miles northwest of the Gonzales, close enough to be within torpedo range of the shipping lane. The rules of engagement did not authorize an attack. The submarine had not demonstrated hostile intent. It was in international waters, or at least waters Iran claimed as its own. Sinking it would be an act of war beyond the blockade mandate. Instead, the Poseidon went active. Dropped a pattern of active sonobuoys that pinged the submarine's hull with sound energy that told the Iranian captain, "We know exactly where you are." The submarine went deep, turned east, and withdrew toward Iranian territorial waters at maximum submerged speed. Approximately 17 knots, which for a kilo is practically a sprint. The acoustic signature was unmistakable, and every American sonar asset in the Gulf tracked it all the way home. The crisis was over, but it proved what CENTCOM already suspected. Iran was learning the blockade's weaknesses in real time, and those weaknesses were growing every day the operation continued. Comment sortie if you think the blockade can hold at this tempo. By the last week of March, the emergency measures were taking effect. 12 replacement Super Hornets arrived from NAS Lemoore, ferried across the Atlantic and Mediterranean by a relay of tankers. CVW-8's MC rate climbed back to 51%. Not good, but enough. The additional KC-46 tankers from Fairchild reduced the refueling gap that had nearly stranded Lieutenant Commander Voss. Daily tanker sorties increased from 90 to 118. The math improved. Slightly. But the cost was visible in metrics that don't make briefing slides. Pilot fatigue surveys showed 73% of CVW-8 aviators rated their fatigue level as significant or severe. 2 pilots were voluntarily grounded after reporting microsleep episodes during combat air patrols. Momentary lapses of consciousness at 30,000 feet over hostile waters. Maintenance crew turnover spiked. 14 sailors from the Ford's Aircraft Intermediate Maintenance Department requested early transfer or separation, citing burnout. Master Chief Tanaka's safety concerns were validated when a maintenance technician improperly torqued a bolt on a Super Hornet's wing fold mechanism. The error was caught during inspection. If it hadn't been, the wing could have failed during a catapult launch. The human cost was real, but the blockade held. By March 29th, American air power had intercepted or diverted 47 vessels attempting to deliver prohibited materials to Iranian ports. 13 ships were boarded and inspected. 4 were seized carrying cargo that matched proliferation watch lists. Specialized aluminum tubes, vacuum pumps, and in one case, a container of ring magnets consistent with centrifuge-bearing assemblies. Iran's ability to reconstitute its enrichment program was being strangled. Slowly, expensively, and at enormous strain on the force executing the mission. But it was working. The Air Force's contribution was often invisible but essential. Beyond the tankers, RC-135V rivet joint electronic reconnaissance aircraft flew daily missions from Al-Udeid, monitoring Iranian military communications. RQ-4 Global Hawks circled at 65,000 feet, their sensors building a real-time picture of Iranian military movements across the entire country. When an Iranian Bavar 373 battery activated, like the one that illuminated Lieutenant Commander Voss, the intelligence was processed and disseminated to every American aircraft in the theater within 90 seconds. The logistics pipeline stretched back 10,000 miles. Spare parts flew from depots in Oklahoma and California to staging bases in Germany, then to Bahrain, or directly to the carriers. A single F-414 engine traveled from Jacksonville to the Ford in 6 days. A process that involved 3 different aircraft types, 2 trucks, and a helicopter delivery to the carrier's flight deck. All to keep 1 fighter flying. Multiply that by 114 aircraft every day for months. Subscribe if you want to see what happens when this blockade faces its next test. April 2026. The blockade continues, but the strategic picture is shifting in ways that briefing slides cannot fully capture. Iran has not attempted another submarine probe since the March 19th incident. The Kilo that was detected and tracked has not left port. Intelligence analysts believe the Iranian Navy is reassessing its approach, not abandoning confrontation, but searching for a method that doesn't risk losing one of its 3 operational submarines. The IRGCN fast boat probes continue, but at reduced frequency. 2 or 3 per week, down from daily. Each one still forces a response. Each response still costs fuel, flight hours, and maintenance cycles. The strategy of exhaustion hasn't stopped. It's been optimized. In Washington, the Congressional Armed Services Committee has requested a classified briefing on Operation Persian Gate's sustainability. The 11-day warning from Admiral Solorzano's message has leaked. Not the document itself, but the number. 11 days. It appeared in a Washington Post article on March 28th, attributed to senior defense officials familiar with carrier operations. The article questioned whether the Navy could sustain a 2-carrier blockade through the summer. The Navy's response was to announce that the USS Dwight D. Eisenhower would deploy 3 months early to relieve the Truman, arriving in the Gulf by late May. The announcement was meant to signal resolve. Inside the Pentagon, it signaled something else. The Navy was burning through its carrier rotation schedule at an unsustainable rate. Deploying the Eisenhower early meant shortening its maintenance period, which meant degraded readiness, which meant the same problems the Ford was experiencing would eventually replicate across the fleet. The Air Force faces parallel challenges. Al-Udeid's ramp space is at maximum capacity. Tanker crews are flying more hours per month than at any point since the Iraq War. The KC-135 fleet, average airframe age over 60 years, is experiencing structural fatigue issues that the Air Force's maintenance depot can barely address. One conclusion is certain. The United States can enforce a blockade of Iran with air power. It proved that in 5 months of continuous operations. 114 aircraft, thousands of sorties, 47 intercepts, 4 seizures, 0 combat losses. One consequence will define what comes next. The Navy's carrier force is being consumed by this operation. Maintenance debts are accumulating that will take years to repay. Every month Persian Gate continues, the fleet's ability to respond to a crisis elsewhere, Taiwan, the South China Sea, the Baltic, degrades. One question remains unanswered. Master Chief Tanaka's memo asked it plainly. How long before exhaustion causes the catastrophic failure that statistics guarantee? No one has given him an answer, because the answer depends on a variable no model can predict. The exact moment when a human being, pushed beyond the limits of endurance, makes a mistake that machines cannot catch. The aircraft are still flying tonight, 106 of them as of the last count. The patrols continue, the tankers cycle. The maintenance crews work through another 20-hour shift under fluorescent lights in the Ford's hangar bay. The blockade holds, for now.